Rachel Cole adjusted her aviator sunglasses against the Montana morning sun, watching her student fumble through another landing approach. At 41, she'd spent the last 12 years teaching teenagers and weekend warriors how to fly Cessnas at Glacier Valley Aviation. The locals knew her simply as Miss Rachel, a patient flight instructor who never raised her voice, even when students nearly stalled at 50 feet. "Ease back on the yoke, Tommy," she said calmly into her headset. "Feel the aircraft, don't fight it." 16-year-old Tommy Henderson was the sheriff's son, desperate to impress his girlfriend before homecoming. He'd been taking lessons for 3 months, and Rachel could see the potential in him, the same instinctive understanding of flight, dynamics that separated natural pilots from those who simply learned to operate aircraft. As Tommy finally greased the landing, Rachel felt her phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. "Need to talk. Coffee shop on Main Street. 1 hour. Come along." She frowned. In 12 years of civilian life, she built careful walls around her past. No one in Glacier Falls knew that Miss Rachel had once been Captain Rachel Cole, call sign Red Falcon, the most decorated fighter pilot of her generation. No one knew about the 247 combat missions, the Syrian campaign, or the classified operation that ended her military career in 2012. "Great job today, Tommy," she said as they shut down the engine. "Practice those crosswind techniques before next week." Walking across the small airfield, Rachel noticed a black sedan parked near the terminal government plates, tinted windows. Her blood chilled. After 12 years, had someone finally found her? At Maggie's diner, she spotted him immediately. Colonel Marcus Webb, older now, grayer, but unmistakably her former squadron commander. He'd been the one person who'd tried to fight her discharge, who'd understood why she'd refused to bomb those refugee families in Syria. "Rachel," he stood as she approached. "You look good. Civilian life suits you. What do you want, Marcus?" She slid into the booth, positioning herself with a clear view of the exits. Old habits died hard. "There's going to be a drone strike tomorrow morning. Target's a compound 60 miles north of here. Suspected terrorist cell planning an attack on American soil." He slid a tablet across the table showing satellite imagery. "Intelligence says it's clean, no civilians, no collateral concerns." Rachel studied the photos, her trained eye picking up details others might miss. Something felt wrong. The compound's layout, the vehicle patterns, the way laundry was hung to dry in what should be an abandoned area. "Why are you showing me this?" Marcus leaned forward. "Because 12 years ago, you saw something in Syria that saved 63 lives. Your instincts were perfect then, and I need them to be perfect now. I'm not military anymore. Haven't been for over a decade." The strike launches at 0800 tomorrow from Malmstrom Air Force Base. If you think there's any chance civilians are in that compound, ... quotes. He left the sentence hanging. Rachel stared at the images, her pulse quickening. The building layout reminded her too much of Syria, of families seeking shelter in structures that looked abandoned to overhead surveillance. "I can't stop a military operation, Marcus. I'm nobody now." "You're Red Falcon," he said quietly. "And sometimes nobody is exactly who the world needs." That night, Rachel lay awake staring at her bedroom ceiling. On her nightstand sat a dusty frame containing the only photo she'd kept from her Air Force days, her squadron standing beside their F-16s after returning from Syria. She'd been so young then, so certain that following orders was the same as doing right. The compound's coordinates burned in her memory. Tomorrow at 0800, Hellfire missiles would reduce those buildings to rubble. If families were sheltering there, if her instincts were correct, innocent people would die because she chose comfortable silence over dangerous action. Rachel rose before dawn, methodically conducting her pre-flight check on her old Cessna 172. The aircraft had been her therapist, her church, a connection to the sky that had once been her life. Now, it might become her weapon against injustice. As she taxied toward the runway, she thought about Tommy Henderson and her other students' kids who looked up to her, who trusted her to teach them not just how to fly, but how to make good decisions in the air. Today would be the most important lesson she'd ever given, even if they'd never know about it. The Montana sky opened before her as she climbed toward the restricted airspace surrounding Malmstrom. Every instinct screamed that she was making a mistake, that 12 years of quiet anonymity were about to end in spectacular fashion. But as the sun painted the mountains gold, Rachel Cole made peace with her choice. Some flights you take for yourself. Others you take for people who can't defend themselves. Today's flight was for the families who might be sleeping peacefully in a compound marked for destruction, unaware that their lives hung in the balance of one woman's willingness to break the rules when the rules were wrong. Red Falcon was coming. Out of retirement, Lieutenant Jake Thompson was having the best morning of his career until the radar contact appeared on his screen. At 28, he'd been stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base for 6 months, eagerly waiting for his first real intercept mission. Montana wasn't exactly a hotbed of aerial threats, but when Senior Airman Rodriguez called out the anomalous contact, Jake's pulse spiked with excitement. Unknown aircraft, single engine, approaching from Sector 4, Rodriguez announced from the radar station. No transponder, no flight plan, no radio contact. ADA to restricted zone. 12 minutes. Colonel Hayes, the watch commander, moved swiftly. Scrambled 2 F-16s immediately. Unknown aircraft approaching during active weapons training. Treat as potential hostile until proven otherwise. Jake sprinted toward his aircraft, adrenaline flooding his system. This was what he'd trained for, protecting American airspace from potential threats. His wingman, Captain Lisa Warren, formed up beside him as they launched into the crystal-clear Montana sky. Viper 1 has visual contact, Jake reported as they closed distance. Through his HUD, he could see a small civilian aircraft flying, straight and level at 8,000 feet. No evasive maneuvers, no attempt to flee. Almost like the pilot wanted to be intercepted. Unidentified aircraft. This is United States Air Force. You are entering restricted airspace during active military operations. Turn around immediately, or you will be fired upon. Silence. The Cessna continued its steady course toward the base. Jake's finger moved toward his cannon trigger. Standard protocol demanded warning shots, then escalation to lethal force if the pilot ignored commands. But as he positioned for a better intercept angle, something caught his eye. Faded markings on the aircraft's wing paint worn by years of weather, but unmistakable to anyone who knew aviation history. A Red Falcon insignia, wings spread in a diving attack position. "Control, this is Viper 1, Jake radioed, his voice tight with disbelief. "Target aircraft is displaying Red Falcon insignia. Request immediate confirmation of pilot identity." "Negative, Viper 1. No such call sign exists in current database. Red Falcon designation was retired over a decade ago. Maintain intercept protocol." But Jake hesitated. Every pilot knew the stories, even if they weren't supposed to discuss them. Red Falcon had been legendary until she chose conscience over orders and disappeared into civilian life. The Cessna suddenly banked left, not away from the base, but toward a different sector entirely. Jake realized with growing alarm that the aircraft wasn't trying to attack the military installation. It was heading directly toward the drone command center, where unmanned aircraft were being prepped for a strike mission, scheduled to begin in exactly 18 minutes. "Control, unknown aircraft is not targeting base facilities. Aircraft appears to be heading toward Sector 7, UAV operations. Recommend immediate caution on scheduled unmanned missions." Instead of forcing the aircraft down, Jake made a decision. That could end his career. He chose to follow it, maintaining visual contact while his instincts told him that whoever was flying that weathered Cessna wasn't a terrorist. They were trying to prevent something catastrophic. Below them, Rachel's fingers moved across her radio panel with muscle memory that hadn't faded despite 12 years away from military aircraft. She activated an emergency frequency that hadn't been used since the Cold War. Aha! Priority Alpha Emergency Code, known only to senior command staff and veteran pilots who had served during the most classified operations. The signal bypassed every normal communication protocol. It was the kind of emergency transmission that could stop wars or start them, reserved for threats to national security or imminent civilian casualties on a massive scale. On the ground at Malmstrom Air Force Base, General Marcus Patterson was reviewing the morning's drone strike mission when his secure communications panel erupted with an alarm he hadn't heard in 15 years. The priority alpha signal indicated an immediate threat to civilian populations. Patterson's face went pale as recognition hit him. The last time he had heard that signal was during a classified operation in Syria when a single pilot had prevented his entire unit from walking into an ambush. That pilot's call sign had been Red Falcon, and she had saved his life along with 43 other soldiers. All UAV operations halt immediately, Patterson commanded, his voice cutting through the drone control center. Ground all unmanned aircraft until further notice. Deploy immediate reconnaissance teams to verify all target zones. The control room erupted in confusion. The morning strike mission had been planned for weeks, based on what appeared to be solid intelligence about terrorist activity in a remote compound. Multiple agencies had signed off on the operation. But Patterson knew something the younger officers didn't. If someone was using the Priority Alpha emergency code, civilians were about to die unless immediate action was taken. And if that someone was who he suspected, then the intelligence was catastrophically wrong. Meanwhile, Jake watched the small Cessna begin to turn away from the military zone. His radio crackled with new orders that changed everything. Viper 1, provide honor. Escort for civilian aircraft. Do not engage, repeat, do not engage under any circumstances. Pilot is confirmed friendly with highest security clearance. Jake formed up alongside the weathered Cessna, close enough to see into the cockpit. The pilot was a woman with graying hair, wearing no military uniform, just a worn leather flight jacket and aviator sunglasses. But her flying technique was absolutely flawless, the kind of precision that came from thousands of hours in high-performance military aircraft. She turned toward Jake's F-16 and gave him a brief salute through the window, a gesture of mutual respect between pilots. Jake returned it immediately, understanding without words that he was flying alongside someone legendary, someone who had just prevented a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. 28 minutes after the Priority Alpha emergency signal, Major David Santos burst into General Patterson's office with reconnaissance photos that made the general's worst fears reality. "Sir, ground teams have confirmation," Santos reported, spreading aerial photographs across Patterson's desk. Target coordinates contain approximately 70 civilian refugees, including 36 children. They're sheltering in buildings that were marked for destruction. Patterson closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what had almost happened. Without the emergency signal, the military would have carried out an airstrike that would have killed dozens of innocent people and created an international crisis that could destabilize the entire region. The compound appears to be a refugee camp, not a terrorist stronghold, Santos continued. Families fleeing violence in the Middle East, using falsified documents to reach relatives in Canada. They've been there for 3 weeks. How did our intelligence analysis fail this badly? Patterson demanded. Santos hesitated. Sir, the intelligence wasn't wrong initially. 3 weeks ago, the compound was empty. But our surveillance protocols have gaps. We don't continuously monitor every target zone. The refugees moved in after our final assessment. The implications hit Patterson like a physical blow. The system had failed because it was designed by humans, operated by humans, and therefore subject to human error. Satellite imagery was dated. Intelligence reports were static snapshots of dynamic situations. And today, that failure would have cost 70 innocent lives. Abort all strike missions in Sector 7 immediately, Patterson ordered. Reclassify target zone as protected civilian area. I want a full investigation into how our surveillance protocols allowed this gap. Outside, Rachel's Cessna touched down at the civilian aviation area of Malmstrom Air Force Base. Ground crews and pilots had gathered to witness something extraordinary. Word had spread quickly about what had just happened. A civilian pilot had prevented a catastrophic military error using knowledge and access codes that shouldn't have existed. No one spoke as Rachel taxied to a stop and shut down her engines. But every person present understood they had just witnessed history. General Patterson was waiting when Rachel climbed out of her aircraft, looking older than she remembered, but with the same intensity she recalled from their days serving together in Syria. "Rachel," he said simply, "it's been too long." "Marcus," she replied with a slight nod, "you haven't changed much. We screwed up badly today, without your warning." He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would have happened. Rachel declined all interviews, all medals, all official recognition. She had learned long ago that doing the right thing didn't require an audience or applause. When the base public affairs officer approached her about a ceremony, she simply shook her head and continued walking toward her aircraft. "I'm not here for recognition," she told Patterson as they stood beside her Cessna. "I'm here because 70 people deserve to wake up tomorrow morning with their families intact." Patterson nodded, understanding completely. The system failed. Those civilians today. Hell, it failed you 12 years ago when we forced you out. But you didn't fail them. Rachel ran her hand along the wing of her old aircraft, feeling the metal that had carried her through another crisis. The system isn't perfect, Marcus. It's run by people, and people make mistakes. But that doesn't mean we stop trying to do better. Your discharge papers, Patterson said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. I had them reviewed by legal. The decision was politically motivated, not operationally justified. We can reinstate you tomorrow, restore your rank and pension. Rachel looked at the envelope but made no move to take it. I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not the same person who wore that uniform. And maybe that's exactly what made today possible. She climbed back into her cockpit, running through post-flight checks with methodical precision. Through the windscreen, she could see young pilots watching her with curiosity, some probably wondering who she was and why their commanding general was treating a civilian instructor with such reverence. "Will we see you again?" Patterson asked, as she prepared to taxi out. "Only if you need me," Rachel replied, starting her engines. "And let's both hope you don't." But even as she spoke those words, Rachel knew that the world was complicated, that intelligence would fail again, that innocent people would find themselves in the crosshairs of military operations planned by good people making decisions based on imperfect information. She also knew that she would be watching, ready to break the rules again when the rules would break everything else. As her Cessna lifted off into the Montana sky, Lieutenant Jake Thompson watched from the flight line, still processing what he'd witnessed. He'd spent his entire career training to follow orders, to trust the chain of command, to believe that the system worked. Today had shattered those assumptions. Today had shown him that sometimes the most important missions were the ones nobody ordered you to fly, carried out by people who had already walked away from the war but couldn't walk away from their conscience. 3 weeks after the incident at Malmstrom, Rachel fell back into her routine at Glacier Valley Aviation. She taught Tommy Henderson how to handle emergency landings, guided weekend pilots through instrument procedures, and maintained the careful anonymity she built over 12 years of civilian life. But word had begun to spread through the tight-knit military aviation community. Whispered conversations in officers' clubs, coded discussions on secure frequencies, speculation about the civilian pilot who had prevented a catastrophic friendly fire incident using emergency protocols that shouldn't have existed. At Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado, Major Kelly Reynolds was analyzing satellite intelligence when her secure phone rang. The voice on the other end was familiar General Patterson from Malmstrom. "Kelly, I need a favor." Quiet, unofficial, and completely off the books. "What kind of favor, sir?" "I need you to run a background check on someone. Deep dive, full military records, classified operations. Name is Rachel Cole, formerly Captain Cole, call sign Red Falcon." Kelly's fingers froze over her keyboard. Every intelligence officer knew that name, even if they weren't supposed to discuss it. Red Falcon had been a legend until she disappeared from official records after refusing to carry out a bombing mission in Syria. "Sir, that's a level 5 classified personnel file. I'd need authorization from—" "You have my authorization," Patterson interrupted. "And Kelly? This is about national security. There may be more situations where we need her expertise." Over the next week, Kelly compiled a comprehensive file that painted a picture of the most exceptional pilot in Air Force history, Rachel. Cole had flown 247 combat missions without a single friendly fire incident. Her tactical brilliance had saved countless ground troops. Her precision strikes had eliminated high-value targets while minimizing civilian casualties. She had been fast-tracked for squadron command and eventual general stars, until Syria changed everything. The classified report from 2012 told the story of a pilot who chose conscience over career. Intelligence had identified a compound as containing terrorist leadership. Rachel had spotted civilian activity, children playing, women hanging laundry, and refused to carry out the bombing mission despite direct orders. Later investigation proved her right. The building contained refugee families, not terrorists. Her refusal to fire had saved 63 innocent lives, including 27 children. But the military couldn't tolerate disobedience in combat, regardless of the outcome. No court-martial, no public trial, just a quiet discharge and her name methodically scrubbed from official records. Kelly's report revealed something else. Rachel Cole had been right in Syria not because of luck, but because of an almost supernatural ability to read battlefield conditions. She could spot patterns that eluded intelligence analysts, sensed danger that satellite imagery couldn't capture. The report concluded with a recommendation that sent chills through every reader. Subject possesses unique tactical intelligence capabilities that may be essential for preventing civilian casualties in future military operations. Recommend establishing unofficial consultation protocols for high-risk missions involving potential collateral damage. Meanwhile, at a coffee shop in Great Falls, Montana, Colonel Marcus Webb sat across from Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a psychologist who specialized in treating veterans with moral injury, a psychological damage that occurred when good people were forced to do things that violated their deepest values. "She saved those people in Syria," Dr. Hayes said after Webb explained Rachel's situation, "but the system punished her for it. That's textbook moral injury, being forced to choose between following orders and following conscience." "She seems to have adapted well to civilian life," Webb observed. "On the surface, yes. But moral injury doesn't just disappear. It changes people fundamentally. They become hyper-vigilant about injustice, compulsively protective of innocent people. They develop an almost allergic reaction to authority figures who abuse power. Webb leaned forward. What happens when someone like that encounters another situation where innocent people are at risk? They act, Dr. Hayes said simply. They can't help themselves. The moral injury that ended her military career also ensures she never stop fighting for people who can't protect themselves. That evening, Rachel was closing up the flight school when her phone buzzed with another cryptic text from an unknown number. Chemical plant explosion planned for Phoenix. 847 people in the blast radius. Emergency services won't be prepared. Saturday 3 p.m. You're the only one who can stop it. Rachel stared at the message, her hands trembling slightly. Whoever was sending these messages had access to classified intelligence and knew exactly how to manipulate her conscience. She could ignore it, pretend it was a hoax, continue her quiet life as a flight instructor in Montana. Or she could accept that some people were born to stand between evil and innocence, regardless of the personal cost. Saturday was 2 days away. Phoenix was a 3-hour flight in her Cessna. And somewhere in that city, 847 people were going about their daily lives, unaware that their survival might depend on a disgraced pilot who had already sacrificed everything, once for strangers she'd never met. Rachel locked up the flight school and walked to her truck, her mind already calculating fuel requirements, flight plans, and the dozen ways her next mission could go catastrophically wrong. Some people retire from heroism. Others discover that heroism never retires from them. Rachel spent Friday night poring over satellite images of Phoenix, studying the Zenith chemical processing plant and its surrounding neighborhoods. The facility produced industrial solvents and contained enough hazardous materials to create a disaster zone, spanning 12 city blocks if properly detonated. Her mysterious contact had provided disturbing details. A terrorist cell planned to truck bomb the plant's main processing unit at 3 p.m. on Saturday, when weekend shift workers would be present, but emergency response would be minimal. The explosion would trigger a chain reaction through the chemical storage tanks, creating a toxic cloud that would kill everyone within a half-mile radius. Rachel's phone rang at 2 a.m. General Patterson's voice was tense. "Rachel, we have a situation. Phoenix PD received a bomb threat against the Zenith plant, but they're treating it as a hoax." The caller claimed to be you. "I never called Phoenix PD," Rachel said immediately. "I know, but someone wanted you connected to this. FBI is analyzing the call now." "Rachel, I need to ask, are you planning something?" She hesitated, staring at the flight charts spread across her kitchen table. "Marcus, if you had credible intelligence about an imminent terrorist attack, what would you do?" "I'd go through proper channels. Contact FBI, coordinate with local law enforcement, mobilize resources through established protocols. And if those channels were compromised, if the terrorists had inside information about law enforcement response times." Patterson was quiet for a long moment. "Rachel, whatever you're thinking, don't do it alone. Let me help." "Some missions can only be flown solo," she replied. "You taught me that in Syria." Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. Rachel conducted her pre-flight with extra care, knowing this might be her final mission. She'd filed a flight plan to Billings, a routine cross-country training flight that would take her southeast before turning toward Phoenix. At 11 a.m., she lifted off from Glacier Valley Aviation, climbing into the Montana sky with a sense of a grim purpose. In her flight bag were emergency flares, a handheld radio tuned to Phoenix emergency frequencies, and a letter she'd written to Tommy Henderson, explaining why sometimes good people had to break bad rules. Phoenix Approach Control cleared her into the airspace at 2:15 p.m. from 3,000 feet. Rachel could see the Zenith plant, a sprawling complex of storage tanks and processing buildings surrounded by residential neighborhoods. Families having weekend barbecues, children playing in backyards, people living normal lives while disaster approached. Her radio crackled with Phoenix Tower. Cessna 47,891. You're cleared to overfly the city. Maintain current altitude and heading. Rachel keyed her microphone. Phoenix Tower, Cessna 47891, requesting priority emergency frequency for security matter. Negative 891. File formal request through. Rachel switched to the emergency frequency anyway. Broadcasting on 121.5. Phoenix Emergency Services. This is former Air Force Captain Rachel Cole. I have credible intelligence about an imminent terrorist attack on the Zenith chemical plant. Attack scheduled for 1500 hours today. Recommend immediate evacuation of surrounding neighborhoods. The response was swift and dismissive. Unknown aircraft, you are not authorized for emergency broadcasts. Clear this frequency immediately or face federal charges. At 2:45 p.m., Rachel spotted them, a white panel van moving slowly through the industrial district toward the Zenith plant's main gate. Her training kicked in as she noted the vehicle's behavior. Careful speed control, driver checking mirrors. Frequently, passenger making phone calls. She dove her Cessna to 500 feet, following the van while broadcasting continuously. Phoenix emergency. White panel van approaching Zenith plant from the northeast. Multiple occupants, suspicious behavior pattern consistent with terrorist reconnaissance. Aircraft 47,891. You are in violation of multiple federal regulations. Land immediately at Phoenix Sky Harbor or face military intercept. The van stopped at the plant's main gate. Rachel watched through binoculars as men in coveralls emerged, approaching the security checkpoint with what appeared to be legitimate credentials. They were inside. Rachel made a decision that would either save lives or destroy what remained of her reputation. She pulled her Cessna into a steep climb, then began broadcasting on every emergency frequency simultaneously. All Phoenix emergency services, this is Red Falcon. Terrorist attack in progress at Zenith chemical plant. Immediate evacuation required for 12-block radius. This is not a drill. Using her old call sign was a violation of federal law. Impersonating military personnel carried serious prison time, but it got attention. Within minutes, her radio exploded with traffic. Phoenix Fire Department scrambling hazmat teams, Phoenix PD dispatching bomb squad units, FBI coordinating with local agencies, FIA demanding her immediate landing. At exactly 3 p.m., as emergency vehicles surrounded the Zenith plant and evacuation sirens wailed across the neighborhoods, Rachel watched the white van race away from the facility's back gate. Whatever they had planned was abandoned in the face of massive law enforcement response. Phoenix Tower ordered her to land at Sky Harbor, where FBI agents and federal prosecutors waited to arrest her for multiple violations of federal aviation law, impersonating military personnel and creating a public panic. As Rachel taxied to the parking area surrounded by federal agents, her phone buzzed with a final message from her mysterious contact. 847 lives saved. Thank you, Red Falcon. She shut down her engine and stepped out of the aircraft, hands visible, ready to face the consequences of doing what she believed was right. Sometimes, heroism looks like flying fighter jets in combat zones. Sometimes it looks like being arrested by the people you saved. The federal holding cell in Phoenix was sterile and cold. Nothing like the squadron-ready rooms where Rachel had once planned missions to protect American interests overseas. Now she sat alone, charged with impersonating military personnel, violating federal aviation regulations, and inciting public panic. FBI Special Agent Diana Foster entered the interrogation room with a thick file and a skeptical expression. She was young, probably mid-30s, with the kind of aggressive competence that reminded Rachel of her younger self. Captain Cole, Should I say, former Captain Cole? Agent Foster began, settling into the chair across from Rachel. You've created quite a situation here. I prevented a terrorist attack, Rachel replied calmly. Your bomb squad found explosive residue at the Zenith plant, confirming my intelligence was accurate. Intelligence you obtained how, exactly? Our investigation shows no chatter about Phoenix targets, no credible threats through official channels. Yet somehow a disgraced pilot in Montana receives detailed information about a terrorist plot. Rachel remained silent. She couldn't explain the mysterious text messages without sounding paranoid or delusional. The truth was, she didn't know who was feeding her information, only that it had been accurate twice now. Let me tell you what I think happened, Foster continued. I think you're suffering from some kind of post-traumatic episode. You have a savior complex from your military service, and you're creating these dramatic scenarios to feel important again. The bomb residue at the plant could have been planted by you or an accomplice. We're analyzing it now, but preliminary tests show commercial-grade explosives, easily obtained by someone with your background. Rachel felt the walls closing in. Without proof of the terrorist threat, without knowledge of who was sending her intelligence, she looked like exactly what Foster suggested, a mentally unstable veteran playing hero. The interrogation continued for hours. Foster was thorough, professional, and completely convinced that Rachel was either delusional or criminal. The case against her was strong. Multiple federal violations, number credible source for her intelligence, and a history of disobeying military orders. At 8 p.m., Rachel's lawyer arrived, a public defender named James Morrison, who looked overwhelmed by the federal charges. He was young, probably handling his first major case, and clearly out of his depth. Miss Cole, I need to be honest with you, Morrison said during their brief consultation. The federal prosecutor is talking about 20 years. Impersonating military personnel is a felony, and with your previous military record, they're treating this as a pattern of disregarding authority. What if I'm right? Rachel asked, what if there really was a terrorist plot? Then you should have gone through proper channels. The law doesn't make exceptions for people who think they know better than the system. That night, alone in her cell, Rachel reflected on the path that had brought her here. Twice now, she'd risked everything to save innocent lives. Twice now. The system had punished her for it. Maybe Foster was right. Maybe she was just a broken veteran who couldn't accept retirement from heroism. But then she thought about the families in Syria, the refugees who would have died if she'd followed orders. She thought about the neighborhoods around the Zenith plant, the children who had been playing in backyards while disaster approached. Even if she spent the next 20 years in federal prison, those people were alive because she had chosen conscience over comfort. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. General Patterson had flown to Phoenix overnight, and his presence in the federal building created a stir among the FBI agents and prosecutors. I need to speak with Captain Cole, he told Agent Foster. It's former Captain Cole, and she's in federal custody on serious charges. I'm aware of the charges. I'm also aware that she may have prevented a terrorist attack that would have killed hundreds of people. I think we need to have a broader conversation about this situation. Patterson's meeting with Rachel was brief but intense. He brought news that changed everything. Intelligence analysts at the Pentagon had identified chatter about a Phoenix operation scheduled for the previous Saturday. The intelligence had been classified at the highest levels, shared only with a handful of senior officials. Someone with access to our most sensitive intelligence channels has been feeding you information, Patterson said. We don't know who, and we don't know why. But Rachel, you're not crazy, and you're not alone. Does this change the charges against me? It should. But the FBI and federal prosecutors don't like admitting they were wrong. They're going to fight this even with evidence supporting your actions. That afternoon, Agent Foster returned to the interrogation room with a different attitude. The arrogance was gone, replaced by professional curiosity and grudging respect. "The Pentagon confirms there was credible intelligence about a Phoenix target," she said without preamble. "Your actions may have been legally questionable, but they appear to have been based on accurate threat assessment. So you're dropping the charges?" "I'm recommending reduced charges and time served." "But Ms. Cole, we need to know who's been providing you with classified intelligence. This represents a serious security breach." Rachel met Foster's eye steadily. "I wish I could tell you, but I don't know who's sending me this information. I only know that innocent people are alive because of it." The federal prosecutor accepted a plea deal. Rachel would plead guilty to violating federal aviation regulations, receive a suspended sentence, and agree to cooperate with the ongoing investigation into the intelligence leaks. It wasn't justice, but it was survival. As Rachel signed the plea agreement, she realized that her actions had created something unprecedented, a gray area in the system where doing the right thing and breaking the law intersected. She had become a reluctant bridge between classified intelligence and civilian protection, operating outside official channels but serving national security interests. Walking out of the federal building in Phoenix, Rachel understood that her life had changed again. She was no longer just a flight instructor in Montana. She was something new, an unofficial guardian who stepped forward when the system failed to protect innocent people. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Well done, Red Falcon. Rest up. You'll be needed again soon." Rachel returned to Montana under a cloud of suspicion and fascination. The Phoenix incident had made national news. Disgraced pilot claims to prevent terrorist attack, and suddenly everyone in Glacier Falls knew that Miss Rachel, the quiet flight instructor, had once been a military legend. Tommy Henderson was waiting at the airfield when she arrived, along with half the town and 3 news vans. Rachel pushed through the crowd without comment, unlocked her hangar, and disappeared inside with her Cessna. But the attention didn't fade. Over the following weeks, reporters called constantly. Conspiracy theorists camped outside her house, and federal agents maintained surveillance from unmarked vehicles. Rachel's simple life as a civilian flight instructor was over. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Michael Chun, a Pentagon intelligence analyst with top-secret clearance, arrived in Glacier Falls on a Tuesday morning, driving a rental car and wearing civilian clothes that couldn't hide his military bearing. "Ms. Cole, I need 5 minutes of your time," he said, approaching her as she walked to the flight school. "I know who's been sending you intelligence, and I know why." Rachel studied him carefully, mid-40s, Asian American, the kind of intense focus that came from years of analyzing classified information. "If you're federal law enforcement, I've already cooperated with your investigation. I'm not law enforcement. I'm the person who's been sending you those messages." Rachel stopped walking. "You're going to need to prove that." Dr. Chun pulled out his phone and typed quickly. Rachel's phone buzzed. "Montana flight instructor saves 70 refugees. Phoenix chemical plant threat neutralized. 2 missions accomplished. Ready for mission 3? "How long have you been watching me?" Rachel asked quietly. "Since Syria. Your discharge was politically motivated. But some of us never forgot what you did there, or why you did it." They walked to a coffee shop away from the reporters and surveillance teams. Chun explained that he was part of an informal network of intelligence analysts, military officers, and Pentagon officials who had grown frustrated with bureaucratic failures that put civilian lives at risk. "The system is designed to be slow and deliberate," Chun said. "Multiple approvals, extensive review processes, careful political considerations. That works for most situations, but sometimes People are about to die while we're following proper channels. So you created a shadow network to bypass the system? We created a network to fill the gaps where the system fails. When our intelligence indicates an imminent threat to civilians, and official channels are too slow or too compromised to respond effectively, we identify someone who can act quickly and decisively. Rachel felt a chill of recognition. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. Rachel, you've proven twice now that you can assess threats accurately, act decisively under pressure, and accept personal consequences to save innocent lives. You're uniquely qualified for this kind of work. Chun slid a tablet across the table, showing satellite imagery of a compound in Eastern Europe. There's going to be a humanitarian crisis in Romania within the next 72 hours. A refugee convoy carrying 400 families is walking into a trap. Local authorities either can't or won't intervene. Official diplomatic channels will take weeks to navigate. Rachel studied the images, her trained eye immediately spotting the tactical problems. The convoy route led through a valley where armed militias could establish killing fields. Escape routes were limited. The refugees were completely vulnerable. What exactly are you asking me to do? Fly to Romania? Warn the convoy leaders. Guide them to a safe alternative route that we've identified. It's a humanitarian mission, completely legal under international law. And if I refuse? Chun's expression grew somber. Then 400 families die in 3 days. And we find someone else who's willing to step forward when the system fails. That evening, Rachel sat in her small house surrounded by newspaper clippings about her Phoenix arrest, federal surveillance reports, and flight charts for Eastern Europe. Her phone rang General Patterson, calling from Malmstrom. Rachel, I've been hearing rumors about Pentagon analysts making unofficial contact with you. Whatever they're proposing, be very careful. There are people in Washington who see you as either a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. What's your advice, Marcus? My advice is to remember that every time you act outside official channels, you make enemies inside the system. Eventually, those enemies will have enough power to destroy you permanently. And your personal opinion? Patterson was quiet for a long moment. My personal opinion is that the world needs people like you. People who put innocent lives ahead of political careers. But Rachel, I can't protect you if you keep operating in this gray area between heroism and vigilantism. After hanging up, Rachel walked outside to her truck and drove to the airfield. Under the Montana stars, she performed a detailed inspection of her Cessna, checking every system, every component. The aircraft that had carried her through 2 recent crises would need to be in perfect condition for what lay ahead. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chun. Romanian convoy departs. Refugee camp tomorrow morning. They have 72 hours before reaching the kill zone. Your flight to Bucharest leaves in 18 hours. Are you committed to this mission? Rachel typed her response carefully. Red Falcon is mission ready. Send coordinates. But even as she sent the message, she understood the implications. Each mission would be more dangerous than the last. Each success would draw more attention from people who saw her either as a tool to be used or a threat to be eliminated. Dr. Chun's network offered her purpose, but it also offered a path toward inevitable destruction. The system never forgot people who consistently proved it wrong. Standing beside her Cessna under the endless Montana sky, Rachel made peace with the choice ahead. Some people were born to fly safe routes at safe altitudes. Others were born to fly dangerous missions in dangerous skies, guided only by conscience and the knowledge that innocent people counted on them to show up when no one else would. Romania was 18 hours away. 400 families were walking toward disaster, trusting that someone somewhere would care enough to warn them before it was too late. Red Falcon was going back to war. 3 months after Romania, Rachel had become a ghost story whispered in Pentagon corridors and intelligence briefings. The unofficial network had given her 12 missions refugee convoys warned away from militia ambushes, chemical plants secured before terrorist attacks, human trafficking operations disrupted by mysterious tip-offs to local law enforcement. Each success made her more valuable to Chun's network and more dangerous to official channels that couldn't control her. Rachel understood she was living on borrowed time, operating in a space between heroism and treason that couldn't exist indefinitely. The end came on a Thursday morning in February. Rachel was teaching instrument approaches to a nervous student pilot when 3 black SUVs surrounded Glacier Valley Aviation. Federal agents emerged with arrest warrants, surveillance equipment, and the kind of grim efficiency that meant someone powerful wanted her neutralized permanently. Agent Diana Foster, the FBI investigator from Phoenix, approached with handcuffs and a look of professional regret. "Rachel Cole, you're under arrest for conspiracy to violate federal espionage laws, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, and operating as an unregistered foreign agent." "Foreign agent?" Rachel asked as Foster secured the handcuffs. "I've been protecting American interests and saving innocent lives. You've been operating outside legal authority based on intelligence provided by unknown sources. We have evidence suggesting coordination with foreign intelligence services." Rachel knew immediately what had happened. Someone in Chun's network had been compromised, or the network itself had been a sophisticated foreign operation designed to manipulate American assets. Either way, she had become a liability that powerful people needed eliminated. The trial was swift and decisive. Federal prosecutors presented evidence of Rachel's unauthorized missions, her contact with Dr. Chen, who had disappeared completely, and financial records showing payments from shell companies with potential foreign connections. Rachel's defense attorney, a competent but overmatched public defender named Kate Sullivan, fought hard but couldn't overcome the narrative that painted Rachel as either a foreign asset or a mentally unstable veteran playing dangerous games with national security. The prosecution's star witness was Agent Foster, who testified that Rachel had consistently operated outside legal channels, refused to cooperate with official investigations, and demonstrated a pattern of believing she knew better than established authority. "The defendant may believe her actions were heroic," Foster testified, "but unauthorized operations based on unverified intelligence represent a clear threat to national security, regardless of good intentions." Rachel's sentencing hearing was held in a federal courthouse in Helena, Montana. Judge Robert Martinez, a former military officer himself, listened carefully as prosecutors recommended 25 years in federal prison. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Rachel stood and addressed the court with the same calm precision she had once used for mission briefings. "Your Honor, I've spent my adult life serving this country first in uniform, then as a civilian who couldn't ignore threats to innocent people. Every mission I undertook was designed to protect lives, not endanger them. I may have broken regulations, but I never betrayed the values this country represents." Judge Martinez sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison, acknowledging her military service, but emphasizing that good intentions couldn't excuse violations of federal law. As Rachel was led away in shackles, she spotted a familiar face in the courtroom gallery. Tommy Henderson, now 19 and wearing the uniform of an Air Force cadet. He saluted her briefly, a gesture of respect that reminded her why she had chosen this path. Federal prison was exactly what Rachel expected: sterile, regimented, and designed to break the spirit of people who had once held significant power. She was assigned to administrative duties in the prison library, where she spent her days filing reports and maintaining records for other inmates. But prison also offered something unexpected: time to reflect on the pattern of her life, the choices that had brought her from decorated fighter pilot to federal prisoner. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the psychologist who specialized in moral injury, visited Rachel 6 months into her sentence. They talked about the psychology of people who couldn't ignore suffering, who felt compelled to act when others remained passive. "You have a condition called hypervigilance for injustice," Dr. Hayes explained. "Syria didn't break you. It revealed who you really are. Someone incapable of standing by while innocent people suffer. Is that a mental illness? It's a moral orientation. Some people are born to follow rules. Others are born to break rules when rules protect the wrong things. Neither is superior. Both are necessary for society to function properly." Rachel served 11 years of her sentence before being released on parole for good behavior. She emerged from federal prison at 52, grayer and quieter, but with the same intensity that had once made her the most feared pilot in the Middle East. Glacier Falls had changed during her imprisonment. The flight school had closed. Her house had been sold to pay legal fees. Tommy Henderson was now Captain Henderson, flying F-35s and telling younger pilots stories about an instructor who had taught him that sometimes the most important flights were the ones that grounded you forever. Rachel found work at a small municipal airport in Wyoming, maintaining aircraft and teaching occasional flight lessons to pilots who didn't know her history. She lived simply, quietly, avoiding attention while staying connected to aviation weather, reports and news feeds that might indicate emerging threats to civilian populations. Her phone, a basic model with no internet access, never buzzed with mysterious messages. Dr. Chen's network had vanished completely, either dissolved by federal investigation or revealed as the foreign operation prosecutors had claimed. But Rachel kept her pilot's license current, maintained her instrument ratings, and performed careful inspections on a 1978 Cessna 172 that she'd purchased with money saved from prison wages. Because some people retire from heroism and others simply wait for the next time innocent people need someone willing to risk everything on their behalf. On quiet evenings in Wyoming, Rachel would sit outside her small trailer and scan the sky for aircraft that shouldn't be there, listening to radio chatter that might indicate emerging crises, ready to act if the system failed again and civilians needed protection from people who valued following orders more than saving lives. Red Falcon was grounded, but not destroyed, waiting patiently for the call that might never come or might arrive tomorrow, demanding that she choose once again between personal safety and the moral obligation to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The story of Rachel Cole reminded everyone who heard it that heroism doesn't require permission from authority figures, recognition from officials, or approval from systems designed to maintain order rather than protect innocence. Sometimes, the most important missions are flown by people who have already lost everything, guided only by conscience and the unshakable belief that someone needs to show up when no one else will. In a world where following orders often means ignoring suffering, Rachel proved that the greatest courage sometimes looks like the willingness to be wrong about everything except what matters most, that innocent people deserve protection, regardless of the personal cost to those strong enough to provide it. Her legacy lived not in official records or military honors, but in the lives she saved, and the reminder that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they choose to care more about doing right than being safe. Unidentified aircraft turn around immediately, but sometimes the most important flights are the ones nobody orders you to take, flown by people who understand that conscience matters more than comfort, that protecting innocent people is worth any personal sacrifice. Type Falcon if you believe some rules are worth breaking when breaking them saves lives. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Share your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose between following rules and doing what's right? What would you have done in Rachel's situation? Let us know in the comments. For more incredible stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, check out our playlist of real-life heroes who changed everything with one brave decision. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Thank you for being part of our community. Your support means everything to us.